Mike Reed from SoundQuest. Thank you so much for coming on the Borderline podcast this evening. How are you? All the way from Canada?
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. I'm, like I said to you in the pre-chat, I'm really, really, really excited to get into this one. There's a lot of what you're going to cover that's of great interest to me, and I know it's going to be a great interest to everybody else listening. So why not, for, I'm guessing, anybody listening that doesn't know who you are, could you just give us a little bit of background of who you are and how you managed to, get into sound healing and SoundQuest?
Yeah. So about, let's say 10 years ago, or maybe even more now, I've been a musician, just to give you some pre-context, since I was a child. Basically, I started piano when I was like 6 years old, and that turned into guitar and then drums, and I was in all kinds of bands, and I went to music school and that sort of thing. And I didn't realize that sound and music could have profound healing benefits and effects on the physical body, on the mind, on the emotional states, until I was in a position where I was sort of on my knees in life, bewildered, going through my own challenges, my own sort of seeking of getting better and healing and trying to find ways to, get into an upward spiral in life rather than a downward spiral. So through that journey, I started by practicing yoga. That was like kind of one of my first things that I discovered that could actually change my inner state. My inner world could be transformed through this holistic wellness practice that didn't require, like pharmaceutical medications or anything like that, like antidepressants or anything like that. So I was like, wow, this is fascinating that you can change your state by, moving your body in a certain way and breathing in a certain way. And also like changing my diet was really impactful. And then I got into other things that sort of like was the first thread that got me on this path, right? And then it turned into breath work, then joined a men's work organization, went to a Tony Robbins event even, and I was like doing float tank therapy, like sensory deprivation tanks, and then I stepped into this. I remember hearing a podcast about psychedelic plant medicines, and I was like, oh, that's what I need, basically hearing this guy talk about his experience in the Amazon jungle and working with these indigenous people who were giving him ayahuasca. And I was like, yep. I was going to go down to Peru. I booked a flight. Oh. And then through, like when we get onto something, there's something called the reticular activator system in the brain, where, there's billions of things that you could be focused on, but based on like what your sort of navigational system in your brain is onto at the time, it'll attract and pick up on things in a kind of what seems to be like a serendipitous process. Things will just sort of reveal themselves on the path that you're on based on like how your thinking is and what you're into at the time. So at the yoga studio that I was practicing, I saw this marketing piece, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, like a little write-up about a woman that does shamanism, right? And I just started learning about shamanism. And I was like, oh, there's that word again, right? And so I called her up and I'm like, hey, I'm going to go down to Peru and do this ayahuasca thing or whatever. And she's like, whoa, maybe you should hold your horses on that a little bit. And, we should have a conversation about like where you're at before you just go and do that. I'm so glad that she, said that to me, because from that, I ended up doing this 3-year shamanic apprenticeship with her, right? And
that's so cool.
I did all this inner work on myself through that process before I went and worked with the plant medicine, which I think is a wise thing to do instead of just going right into that. And, I can see it. If you're not ready for it, I can see how that can be a very overwhelming experience that can cause like dissociation and that sort of thing. So we did a lot of pre-work before I stepped into that's where, the pedal meets the metal, so it was good to do that. But on that journey of that apprenticeship, it was all about sort of uncovering my quintessential voice and my gifts and what I'm naturally inclined to be good at and and that sort of thing. So because I had this musical background, realized that sound and vibration and music is sort of an extension of my soul. It's an extension of who I am.
Yeah.
And that's when I discovered, I was on the receiving end a few times of a sound bath or sound healing to do that in that time period. And I was very inspired, and I went down this sort of rabbit hole of studying it. And I remember in a ceremony, the woman, her name's Angela Prider out here in Western Canada. She used to be called West Coast Shamanic, but now she's called Sacred Life Animism. And so she put this instrument in front of me to play in the middle of a ceremony. And I started playing it, and I was doing it for all these other people in the ceremony. And that's when this big download channeled through me, like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do, And then from there, I just started on this incredible transformative journey. Fast forward 10 years, I've now done countless sound baths, in the hundreds of sound bath events for thousands and thousands of people, both in the region where I live and internationally as well. And I've been inspired by it. It's created an entire new life for me, in terms of being in service to other people, but also creating this whole new social sphere and network of people that are like-minded. They're all on the path of wellness, consciousness, healing, self-improvement, that sort of thing. And it's been just a real magic experience of this whole journey. And it continues to unfold. As I walk on the way continues to appear. And now I have this academy that I teach sound healers from around the world, not only the art and the science of sound healing and the practice of sound healing, but also how to turn this into what they do for a living. I have a model that sound healing facilitators can follow so that they can honor it as a business, which from my experience is what's actually going to help more people, right? If you treat it with a structure and have a model around things that you follow, you're actually serving more people and impacting more people, which has a beautiful ripple effect in all the communities that we serve.
That was genuine. Sorry, I've just cut you off there, I think. I was just going to jump in there and say that's proper inspirational story. And I love the way that you describe how everything reveals itself, because you're so true. It really does, doesn't it? Like when you're kind of seeking clarity and seeking a little bit of validation, things just start appearing in your periphery, and you start latching onto that. Yeah, I just love the way you describe that, man. Sorry, I totally interrupted you there, mate.
All good. Yeah, no, I think I was pretty much complete on my origin story of how this all unfolded.
Sorry, I read that wrong then. Yeah, so like I say that is really inspiring. And could you just give a bit of a background of I guess what is the theory of sound healing, and how can that really affect every individual?
Right. Yeah. So the way I explain it, there's multiple layers in which you can perceive the effects of sound healing, right? But I'll start with a very foundational kind of scientific explanation of what's happening on a biological, physical level. So I work with instruments such as gongs. I have a collection of gongs, crystal singing bowls, ocean drums, a harmonium, shruti box, chimes, right? And these instruments, particularly like gongs, didgeridoos, certain singing bowls, if they're played in a certain way, in a certain sequence, and if they're in a certain musical scale and they're harmonic and that sort of thing. So what happens is they emanate the full spectrum of sound. So the human hearing range is typically 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. That's what we can perceive in terms of sound and vibration, right? And that varies from person to person, of course. But when the full spectrum of sound, vibration, and frequency is being perceived all at the same time, the part of your mind, so the part of your mind that's hearing me speak right now, and it's interpreting my words and making sense of the sound, right? And it's interpreting the sound, making sense of what it's hearing, right? And that creates an organization in the mind, in the prefrontal cortex. But when the full spectrum of sound and vibration is being perceived all at the same time, then that part of the brain can't grasp onto everything that it's hearing. And so it gets so confused that the encumbrances of that analytical thinking part of the mind just starts to give up out of confusion. So the encumbrances of the thinking mind fall away, and then the brainwaves start to slow down. And so the waking consciousness is beta brainwave, right? So we're in beta brainwave, the task orientated, doing kind of brainwave where you're either, whether you're driving or you are sending an email or having a conversation, that's the beta brainwave. So when you are in a sound healing experience, the brainwaves will slow down and they'll go down to what's called the theta brainwave and the delta brainwave. So you're oscillating somewhere between meditation and sleeping. So theta brainwave is the same brainwave that people achieve when they're in a meditation. And delta is when you fall asleep completely. And you might go to alpha brainwave as well. So when you're there, that's when the nervous system is in the rest and digest mode. So you go from the sympathetic side of the nervous system to the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. And that's when you're in full rest mode, this like sort of non-sleep, deep rest state. And the nervous system releases, the body returns to homeostasis, and all kinds of self-healing processes. The intelligence of the body overrides the mind. And that's when a lot of healing and restoration occurs in the immune system, the nervous system, the emotional body. And you come out of this experience feeling restored, renewed, and uplifted, ideally. It can also be confronting though, right? Because a lot of people are distracted by their phones, by external stimuli. They're very reactive in their day-to-day life because they're not giving themselves enough time and space to tune inward and tend to their inner garden and tend to their emotions and what's really going on, even on a subconscious level, right? And that's why having a meditation practice so powerful, or a regular time, or whether it's a yoga class or some place where you're distraction free and you can really tune inward. Because if you're not doing that kind of work, then you come to something like a sound bath and all the stuff that you've been sweeping under the rug or ignoring can come to the forefront. The subconscious mind can get activated, and you might have some experiences where uncomfortable emotions come up to the surface. Stuck energy in the nervous system can be releasing. So you might experience these involuntary movements, which I've seen happen. People have tears, people can get agitated or angry, right? I always say that if I have a room full of, say, 30 people in one of my events, I'm going to have 30 different experiences happening all at the same time. It depends what these people are coming into the space with, right? Mm-hmm. So, but for the most part, I hear people coming to me, thanking me. They're glowing afterwards. They can't believe how fast it went by because your aperture of consciousness is expanded and your perception of time changes in that altered state of consciousness. And so I usually do a 90-minute event, and people have told me it felt like 20 minutes.
Yeah. I could. There's a gong bath has just started. I think it's every month at a tiny little village up from us called Codingham. I've not actually been to one yet because I've had to work every single Friday that they've been on. But my mum's been to one or two possibly, and that's exactly what she said as well. The time, you wouldn't believe how fast it feels because you're in. It's like you're there, and then all of a sudden you're relaxed, and then you're up again. And the one thing that you said there that's completely true, speaking to the people that you're healing with, is that, as my mum said, everybody feels refreshed, everybody feels rejuvenated. It's like this reset's been done. Obviously, that must make you feel incredibly warm inside after leaving this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the most enriching parts of everything that I do is the seeing the results after. It's like I can see like immediately in front of me I'm having an impact. And it's the first thing I've ever done for work. Before this I was doing jobs. I mean, there was some gratitude from others in other forms of work I did, but for the most part I was just a paid employee at a company. And I never had this experience before where people are lining up to thank me for what I'm doing for them. Right? It's just
Yeah,
it's
that's
pretty
so
incredible.
cool. Yeah, so obviously you spoke about there, obviously about the the kind of the scientific part of what happens when we listen to music and what effect that has on us. But if we were to really, go into kind of a deeper dive on that, like I spoke to you just before we went on air, that I've had, quite hard times in the past. Music has been that way for me to completely reset the way that I feel internally. Meditate, these feelings have came up or been in a state of anxiety, and I'm looking to reduce these stress factors. What is it about music that really soothes the mind, or your interpretation of that?
Music, we're talking about.
I'm sorry, more sound. Sorry, I keep on saying music, but what I mean is sound on there.
Okay, yes. Well, sound, music can have a profound effect as well. If you've ever had the experience, of listening to a song, it can bring tears. It
Yeah,
can conjure up very strong emotions just listening to a beautiful piece of music, a song, anything that you resonate with musically can have a beautiful effect. It's like a drug almost. It can change your state listening to certain music. Absolutely. But in terms of sound, it can help regulate brain waves. It can promote relaxation, reduce anxiety. It can, relax the body, lower cortisol levels. It can encourage mindfulness and help you detach from overwhelming thoughts. It can completely help the nervous system regulate, right? So there's so many things that happen that you can promote feelings of inner peace, emotional safety. Um, it can be a mechanism for relieving emotional overwhelm. Right? The list goes on. The list goes on. It's a profound healing modality, and I really think it's just on the cusp of becoming mainstream. We're seeing more and more popularity with it as the years go on, but I really think there's going to be a tipping point at some point in the near future where sound is universally embraced, as even in the medical field, and doctors will be prescribing sound and vibration for therapy and healing.
yeah, because that's really interesting. Something that you spoke about right back at the start with your own journey of going through mental health as well, and that's the Western approach of medicine almost sounds like I'm guilty here. I take medicine still for my mental health because I'm in that kind of transient period of quite poor mental health still. I have no shame in admitting that. But the more and more people I speak to on this journey that I'm on, the more and more people seem to be etching away from that side and going to the likes of sound healing or psychedelics. Things that weren't as popular even 20 years ago, we're now seeing more of a narrative of how much that can really impact your mental health and how much you can really help your mental health. And it's a shame that that might have been lost on so many people before us. And it's so true, like you say, it almost feels like we're going to be coming to a tipping point and that we need to be reopen again to exactly how little things in our environment, the things that we do touch and listen to, can really change the way that we live and the way that we perceive ourselves and the others around us. And like I say, I found myself plenty of times when I meditate, I'll put on a certain hertz. If I if I feel agitated and I'm not meditating, maybe just block out some intrusive thoughts. I'll listen to something different. Maybe I'll go to more music. If I'm in the gym, I'm looking for a different type of stimulation entirely. Is there certain frequencies that you found that are, I guess what I'm going to say here is more optimum in the way that they can heal people.
Certain frequencies, like in terms of like the Hertz.
But sorry, the Hertz frequencies is what I was in about there. Sorry.
Well, I think that there's some talk out there in the sound healing field that there's these universal frequencies that will work across the full spectrum of all humans. I don't know if there's any particular like magic number. There's this things like the 528 hertz, which is like the love frequency, 432 hertz, and this hertz does this hertz does that. But I think people are, resonating at different parts of their bodies and that sort of thing, are different resonant frequencies, right?
Yep.
And so I think that might just kind of be like a marketing thing. Is similar to like, they have these singing bowl sets which is like, this singing bowl is for the whole chakra system. Or this singing bowl is for the root chakra. This is for the crown chakra. Like this B note is for the heart chakra or whatever. Right. And I think that might be a bit kind of like just a marketing thing, which could have like a placebo effect maybe. But in my opinion, from what I've done in my research, I don't think that that's necessarily the case. But like I was saying earlier, the way that it entrains the brain waves, right? So if you listen to like binaural frequencies, it can have an effect like bringing you into a theta brainwave state. Yeah. So you can go on Spotify and find these you can have what's called a theta nap. So midday, if you want to recharge and bring your energy back, I think, if more companies and businesses did this with their employees, like have like a kind of a lunch hour theta nap experience provided for employees, they would come back in the second half of the day and have a very productive afternoon. Because what happens is you go into that non-sleep deep rest theta state for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever, and you'll come out of it and you'll have a new boost of energy. It's better than coffee. It's 100 times better than coffee because you don't have that crash, that caffeine crash later on. And you're more focused, more energized. You feel regulated in your nervous system. Yeah. So things like that I think are real, but I don't necessarily think that there's like frequencies that I think there's a range of frequencies. I don't think there's a specific number of frequencies like 528 hertz is gonna elevate your emotional state to gratitude and enlightenment or whatever. Yeah. Right. But there is a pretty fascinating documentary on YouTube that people can watch. It's called Sonic Geometry. Okay. And it's only about 20 to 30 minutes. And it's all about that 432 natural harmony, sometimes called the universal frequency or Earth's frequency. And I believe that has some real truth to it. So if you watch that documentary, it explains the whole thing. Yeah, just the world of sound and vibration is really fascinating in terms of like how it can explain the laws of the universe and nature, right? And because 100%. we are part of that great cosmic orchestra, it affects us too in a profound way.
Yeah, you're so right there. I was actually, it's always weird when I come on a podcast because I've kind of had the very same conversation with somebody a couple of days ago just at work. And we were just talking about how, we're always vibrating, we're always emitting this frequency. And it's exactly how you described there, this almost like a cosmic dance of everything that's intertwined. We feed off vibrations. And for me, my interpretation of that is that you can pick up these frequencies. You pick up on somebody's mood based off the frequency or vibration that they're eliciting at the time. And like you say, it can, for me anyway, what that does is, you're so right again, it gives you a deeper and profounder understanding of what you are and your purpose and who you are. And I think that's so important when we're talking about mental health. Have that understanding that we are all intertwined in some sort of way, and that these things really do affect us. And to go back to the point on Hertz frequencies, you're entirely true as well, because I found myself reading stuff, reading that, a very low Hertz is good for this. I'll then go away, try and get into that deep relaxation, but I'm not getting that same response from my body, the same response from my mind, that calmness that I've had before, because I'm focusing on that Hertz. I don't really like the sound. The sound's not really for me, but it has to work because that's what I've read.
Right.
Just thanks for explaining it that way, because I am guilty of that. Like, I'll read something and I'll think, that's going to help me, and it doesn't. And then, I'm guessing people could be put off by that in the long run. Obviously, you're saying there that it's a bit of a shock of how many people were then lining up to thank you. Have you had anybody coming up and saying how much that does help them, if we were to talk about mental health specifically? Like you say yourself, like, the sound can heal you. It's not a, sorry, I totally lost my word there again. It's not, sorry. The problem with me is I get quite bad intrusive thoughts, and they kind of muddle around in the back of my head and overtake what I'm actually trying to think about. Just put a little mark down in here.
Yeah, so you're wanting to know, like, how the sound healing experiences that I offer helping specifically with mental health.
Yeah. I'll go in and re-ask that question. Sorry, man. Obviously, do you ever people queuing up to say thank you to you? Do you ever understand just how much you are helping them specifically with their mental health? Have you ever had somebody and said, I've been to a couple of your sessions or joined the SoundQuest Academy, and I don't need this medication anymore, or I'm now doing these things in my life? Is that something that you come across?
I think something like a sound bath experience is a great gateway to understanding that it's possible to holistically improve your mental health and improve your emotional regulation and reduce stress and anxiety and become more grounded and present, and building a mind-body awareness, and encouraging relaxation and sleep. And so people come into the experience, and I think it's a great awakening. It can be a great awakening, and it can be the kickstarter of a beautiful journey into holistic approaches to diving inward and improving their mental health and their emotional and spiritual wellness.
And the most important thing there as well is it's a different opportunity. The thing that we almost find, I think, with mental health is people get stuck because they don't want to pursue avenues that just don't align with them personally. Fitness, I love fitness. I go to the gym frequently. It's very good for my mental health, but my wife, she doesn't like it as much. She doesn't get that same benefit, but the narrative is, you'll read it anywhere, being active, being fit is going to help your mental health. And people get stuck there. But so to have something that is relaxing, is about you and not the activity of really having to labor yourself into doing a task. Like you say, you can feel that sound resonating with you, and it can put you in a state of deep relaxation. It's just really, really, really cool to hear and listen and understand that, like I say again, there are other avenues, there are other aspects of hope that come with mental health, and sound healing obviously encompasses that entirely. Would we be able to just talk about the gongs specifically? And I went onto your website a couple of days ago, and I was reading your latest blog post, and I thought that would be a really good topic just to come in and talk about, obviously, the types of gongs and all their different kind of unique qualities, because I know a lot of people obviously go to the gong baths here in Scotland. Could we just talk about that exactly? Just the types and their unique qualities?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I work with a variety of gongs. There's different categories of gongs, different types of gongs, different brands of gongs and companies that produce these gongs. I have, for the most part, I work with a chow gong and two gongs made by a company called Peisty. And I work with them together. And one's an untuned gong, and the two on either side of the untuned gong are tuned. One's tuned to the vibrational frequency of Earth, and then the other one is, apparently, it's called a planetary gong, so it's tuned to the frequency of Jupiter.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I was advised to get these specific set of gongs by Dr. Jane Wells, who's a gong expert. She has a book out called Gong Consciousness, which is definitely worth reading if you're interested in the world of gongs and what they can do. And so they work really well together, and they emanate that full spectrum of sound that I was referring to earlier. Every time, I swear, every single time I do a sound bath, and I spend about 30 minutes in one of my sessions on just the gongs.
Mm-hmm.
And I swear every time someone falls asleep and starts to snore. So I have to have like a protocol, or like I have to do some before the session starts. I have to talk about like what to do if the person next to you starts to snore, because it happens almost every time, because these gongs are entraining the brain waves and slowing them down into the delta brainwave, meaning sleeping. So it's inducing sleep. People will like involuntarily just fall asleep, right? Because they are the full spectrum of sound, and that helps to slow down the brain waves. So yeah, they help to slow down the brain waves and bring your brain waves from high frequency beta active thinking to lower frequency alpha, theta, and delta relaxation, meditative, and sleeping states, right? And the sound of the gongs envelop the listener, the attendee, or the people on the receiving end, and it helps to quiet the racing thoughts and then bring the mind into the present moment, right? Which then, helps with accessing and releasing suppressed emotions, and it's a safe space for processing difficult feelings, perhaps. And it just releases emotional blockages for people, and they feel emotionally refreshed after the gong session ends, right? And so it can also improve insomnia, sleep issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it helps encourage the body shift into a deeply relaxed state, and it reduces cortisol levels. And a lot of people are stuck in that sort of like fight or flight side of the nervous system. It could be related to trauma, intrusive thinking from things that have happened in the past, or things you've experienced, and like being sort of in this low level hypervigilance state all the time, which can really do a lot of harm and damage on your overall health. And so when you experience a gong bath or sound bath, it can train the mind and the body to achieve like a deeper, more sustained sleep pattern.
Yeah.
Right. And it's also good for trauma and PTSD support, because it can release, like I said, like tension held in the muscles and the tissues and the nervous system. There's so many benefits. It can boost creativity, mental clarity, right? And there's major evidence and research that backs all these claims that I'm talking about, right? There's like scientific journals. There's a ton of studies that show that vibrational sound healing, it can have all these healing effects.
Yeah, I need to go and try it. Like I say, I've had. It's not that I've had the opportunity. I've been asked to go to a gong bath. I'm actually going to be completely honest with you just now, and like we spoke about before we went on, before we started recording, and about a mental breakdown that I had that was actually in a water bath. I genuinely thought when somebody first came and said to me, "Do you want to come to a gong bath?" it involved me sitting in an actual bath of water.
I've heard that. Someone asked me one time if they should bring a swimsuit.
Really, I was told very quickly that it is not the same as a conventional bath, but it intrigues me. And like you say, there's scientific literature there that will back every one of these points up, and it goes back into what we were talking about earlier, with almost a Western approach is starting to become a slightly more outdated approach. People are opening up to more possibilities because they just want to improve. They just want to feel better. They just want to move forward for their lives, not caught in this vicious cycle of depressive disorders. Lack of sleep, like you touched on there, it's so vital when we talk about mental health. Again, speaking from experience, I struggle with insomnia greatly. Mindfulness helps me do that. When I don't practice my breathing, I don't sleep. So integrating these into our lives is a healthy routine. And it's a reward aspect as well, because you are essentially you're giving your body some time off. You're allowing yourself to really, like you say, start that healing process internally and come to terms with thoughts that might be, or emotions that might be a little bit uncomfortable. Obviously, I'm well aware that I've only got you for a certain time, so I'm just going to run on to some more of my kind of closing questions. And one of them would be what advice, why should people give sound healing a go to start off with? I know we've just talked about a lot of them points just now, but if we could go back over some of them, what can sound healing do to people with bad anxiety, to people with insomnia, to people with depression, etc.?
Yeah, it can alleviate all of those things, right? It's definitely worth at least giving it a try, right? And just seeing if it's something that will work for you, right? And it's different, not only, it's not going to be the same experience every time. It'll be different for each person, but also different every time you go, right? It depends what, like I said earlier, what you're coming in the space with. But yeah, these rich resonant tones of these instruments, it can stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, and it counters that fight or flight response. And it creates this deep state of relaxation, because what I think is missing for a lot of people is taking time, like carving out time, because we're conditioned, I think, a large part in Western culture, that, in capitalistic society, that like doing is the way. You have to always be doing and taking action. And actually, we're missing a really key component, which is like, it is productive to rest, to do conscious rest, right? And it's, like Carl Jung says, until we bring the unconscious to the conscious, it controls our life, and we call it fate, right? And so diving inward and having that time carved out, whether it's an hour-long sound bath or like some sort of meditation practice, really brings you inward and allows you to identify what's going on in there. Because a lot of times it's just swept under the rug, and we go forward in our lives being completely reactive, external stimuli all the time, just in reactivity. Whereas when you give yourself that space to rest and tune inward and align yourself, align your emotions, align your nervous system, restorative practices like this will give you that buffer so that you go through your days in a more creative way and less reactive way, right? So it just has this amazing sort of ripple effect, right? Because your inner world equals your outer world, right? So if your inner world is in turmoil, stress, and chaos, your external reality is going to reflect that, right? And when you are aligned internally, you're going to find a lot more flow in your life. Things are just going to unfold, and you're going to be in a better trajectory in your life. And so that's the real power of attending sound healing experiences on a regular basis.
That's what I'm getting from that, is that you're wanting to help people help more people. And I take my hat off to you, man. It is so cool, and it's been so cool to speak to you. So thank you so much for coming on the Borderline podcast tonight. You're more than welcome. And like I say, guys, all the information for Mike and SoundQuest Academy will be in the episode description below. If you do want to find out more, just hit any of those links. Until the next episode, guys, from Mike across in Canada, and from Andrew back here in Scotland, this has been the Borderline podcast. Good night.